Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel, where we are bringing the VRIC to you each and every week. My name is Jesse Day, and I am absolutely thrilled for the panel that we're bringing you today. We have Martin Armstrong, founder of Armstrong Economics, and Alex Krainer, founder of Krainer Analytics. We are going to be discussing a bevy of fascinating topics today, including the recent BRICS summit in Kazan, the push for digital IDs and central bank digital currencies, and much more. Gentlemen, it is an honor to have you both on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Yes, great to have you both here. I want to start by discussing the recent BRICS summit in Kazan. There was a lot of people hoping for an official announcement regarding a gold-backed currency, which of course failed to materialize. Instead, we got Putin holding some kind of mock BRICS bill, which I found quite humorous. I'd like your thoughts on the expectation that a gold-backed currency was going to be announced. Was that kind of way too much to expect to begin with? And your thoughts on the summit overall? Did it convince you that the BRICS are truly presenting a threat to U.S. hegemony? And Martin, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I think this idea of a gold-backed currency is almost akin to Marxism. They tend to think that it will bring a panacea of a perfect economy, etc. All you have to do is look at history. Even in the gold standard, there's booms and busts. It does not eliminate the business cycle. And the problem we have today is that socialism has pretty much conquered government. So I don't see how you could have a fixed exchange rate. That's what took down, Bretton Woods. They fixed the gold at 35, but they didn't limit the amount of dollars that they printed. That was Vietnam just took it down. I think a 3-year-old with a pocket calculator can figure that out. It's going to go bust. That's pretty much why, all these pegs break from, the ERM crisis in 92, the Swiss peg. Politicians are always trying to fix things so that they can survive and make it look good. But it's, we have to learn to live with the business cycle. So this idea of gold-backed currency is, it means that number one, you have to eliminate basically socialism. Because how do I run and say, vote for me, I'll give you this? If you can't create a deficit, how are you going to, people don't realize you needed taxes when you did have a gold standard, because you needed some of the physical gold to come back to be able to fund government. Today, they can just print it. Why do we even have taxes? It's, you have Trump even talking about, eliminating the income tax. This is you don't need it if you're just creating it. And we have to move on here. The biggest problem we have is that we're still borrowing money that we don't need to. And then it comes from an old economic theory that, it's less inflationary to borrow than to print. That's when there was physical money. Or because you had it, okay, fine, you were not expanding money supply. But today, that's just not true. You issue the debt, and if you want to trade futures, you can post T-bills. So the debt is just money that pays interest today. So it's just, I think it was really people just constantly talking about gold standard as if it's the panacea for the future, and it's not going to do anything. We have to deal with the politicians first.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Alex, your thoughts on the expectation of this gold-backed currency, and also, did you see the BRICS summit accomplishing anything significant outside of maybe being more of a symbolic gesture to show that there are a group of countries who oppose Western hegemony? What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so you asked me enough to take over the microphone for the rest of the podcast. So let's talk about the money first. I will agree with Martin that gold-backed currency isn't necessarily a solution to anything at all. It would be one way to impose a discipline on the politician and on the central bankers, but that's about it. The BRICS currency was never going to be gold backed. It was going to be partially gold backed, partially backed by other commodities. The gold component was going to be 40%, and everything else was going to be denominated in gold, which I think is particularly smart idea, because one of the big problems that they're facing in trying to dethrone the dollar is just simply people's habits. The dollar is culturally entrenched. Everybody knows what it means that one barrel of oil costs $80. One bushel of wheat costs $500. Everybody understands what that means. It's a very easy means of communications. Price discovery process is one of the main functions of the market. And for people to know what a price of something in some unit means is absolutely essential. So, if they're going to be trying to turn the discussion to, a barrel of oil is 2 grams of gold, because this is the intent. A bushel of wheat is 10 grams of gold, and etc. Then there you're starting to make some inroads, in dislodging this dollar culture. With respect to whether the currency was going to be introduced or not, just the political move, I've been paying close attention to that. I must say that there's been a lot of mixed signaling there. First, they were going to introduce the currency. Then, I think starting about 2 years ago, people like Sergei Glaziev started to say, "Oh no, that's complicated. It's not necessary. It's enough that we move away to trading, making it possible for different countries to settle their trade balances in their own national currency. That's it." And now, a few months ago, we had the introduction of this so-called the unit. And I thought initially that the unit was a gimmick till I read the white paper. And once I read the white paper, I realized that it was a very serious thing, and that it was a very sophisticated idea, and that it completely changes the financial architecture that's being proposed in ways that are very interesting and probably very promising. And so I would wager that the unit is what they are intending to introduce eventually. But, given the complexity of the task, given this cultural entrenchment of the dollar, given that a lot of things have to change, it's going to take time. So I think that from their point of view, there's no rush, because if you rush it, you're going to make mistakes. The Bretton Woods system is something that happened in a relatively short time in 1948, in the aftermath of World War II. But it took another 10 years for Bretton Woods system to be fully implemented. 10 years. And there was no opposition to it. And then it lasted until 1971. So, a total of 13 years. Wasn't that great, right? It has a name, but when you look into it, it wasn't that great. It wasn't a solution. And then, the last element that I mentioned is Vladimir Putin showing this banknote. That again, to me, is like some kind of mixed signaling there, because he made a statement explicitly during the Kazan summit that a BRICS currency wasn't even discussed. And then they showed that banknote, and I only saw the banknote in photographs, so I can't tell whether this was a laser printed banknote, or if this was a real thing. It looked like a real thing to me, like I'm not sure if it had any of those holographic things, but it looked like a real banknote. And if it was, they went through a lot of trouble to produce that one note. And if they did, then maybe they're preparing a surprise somewhere down the road. We'll find out. I don't know.
Quick break here. This episode is brought to you by West Red Lake Gold Mines. Now, if you know nothing about West Red Lake Gold Mines, let me tell you one thing. This company was founded on the back of a transaction where they purchased the Madsen mine in northwestern Ontario in an area called the Red Lake Gold District, which to date has produced around 30 million ounces of gold from some of the richest gold deposits in the world. Now, what they paid for this mine versus what they got has led legendary mining entrepreneur Frank Giustra to call this transaction the deal of the decade. And Bob Moriarty, founder of 321 Gold, was recently on my show calling West Red Lake Gold Mines one of the two most undervalued gold companies in Canada. If you're curious why these individuals are so excited about West Red Lake Gold Mines, hit the link below to learn more. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts. And just to follow up with both of you, Martin, I'll go with you first. Outside of the potential introduction of this gold-backed currency, which never happened, how do you see the BRICS position today? Obviously, there was some new countries not fully admitted, but considering for application, and they've kind of been. I don't know exactly how it works, but they haven't been fully admitted yet, but they're waiting to be accepted. So it seems more countries are on board. I know here in Serbia, the government has said that, I think Vučić, the president here, has said that BRICS could be an alternative to joining the EU. So we could eventually see Serbia apply for membership. They do like to play, the East and the West, both sides. But what are your thoughts on the current state of the BRICS nations and how they're advancing versus the U.S. Western hegemony?
Well, I think what you have to understand is that, first of all, this was geopolitical. When they put the sanctions on Russia, we're going to remove you from SWIFT. All right. That sent the red flag, up to everybody else. They were even threatening China. Well, if you help Russia, we'll do this to you. Obama tried that. He went to SWIFT back in 2014 when Russia went into Crimea, and he wanted to have them removed. And SWIFT basically said, no, you're not going to turn this into a weapon. And they replaced the head of SWIFT in 2019. So this is more of a geopolitical issue where the American neocons have basically abused their power. And what makes the dollar really the reserve currency is the fact that the U.S. is the largest consumer-based economy. So basically everybody needed to sell something to Americans, Toyotas, BMWs, Porsches, whatever. And for that reason, you still have to sell in dollars. Okay, so that's why you have that's why you have countries issuing debt in dollars so they can sell it to American pension funds and things. The same thing happened with Britain. You can go on eBay and find that China issued bonds in British pounds, so they could sell them in London. So it's more than just a currency. You have to have a financial system, and the neocons are abusing the American system entirely. And so I do think, our computer eventually projects that after 2032, you're going to see the financial capital move to China. You shouldn't have gotten involved in finance of this nature for geopolitical weapons. Once you did that, you really undermined the entire global system, and it has split. And that's what the BRICS is really about. Forget the gold back or this, that. It's more of a, can we trade, freely and fairly without interference from the American neocons? That's really what it comes down to. And most Americans don't understand what these guys have done. And they hide underneath the covers and oh, go back and all this other kind of stuff. But it comes down to geopolitics.
And your thoughts, Alex?
I entirely agree with that. It does come down to geopolitics. It's exactly about these countries being free to trade between themselves. So if you can bypass the dollar, you can sell your goods to and whoever else. You can import somebody else's goods. There's no arbiter in between. There's no policeman, and the proceeds of your sale of commodities or whatever you export are sitting somewhere else, not at the Federal Reserve Bank or in the city of London or in Frankfurt, in euro dollars or in US dollars, where the American government can tell you, well, if you want to buy these jets from Russia, you're not. You have to buy them from Boeing or Airbus. Or if you want to say you want to purchase Citco because that's an interesting investment, they can tell you, no, you cannot. This is of strategic importance to us. Instead, we want you to recycle your money into US treasuries. So you're actually, in a perverse way, you're even financing your own captivity. Everybody becomes captive in this system of trade that West has imposed. And then you have absurd situations where many, many nations spend half of their government budget on servicing the debt, or more than half. And they have no way around it because they cannot even they cannot even choose to spend money on, let's say, essential medicine versus repaying the debt to the IMF or World Bank. That choice is made for them, and it goes to the bondholders, it goes to the financiers. And so one interesting thing that already a while ago, I would say 2 years ago, the Russians and the Chinese have signaled to all these nations of the global majority that if they decided to default on their obligations to the Western financial institutions, that they would not be penalized by the BRICS system. And they also told them that if they chose to renationalize their economies, their companies, their mines, their plantations, fields, their resources in general, that they would not be penalized. So that's a massive carrot that is being offered there. Not only new maneuvering space where you can make sovereign choices about how you wish to deploy your budget, how you wish to trade with other nations, but also you have the choice of basically sticking it to the Western interests, as saying like, okay, these gold mines, now they're ours, they're no longer yours. And we see that happening. We just saw that in Burkina Faso. Venezuela has signaled that, they actually consider the oil resources off of offshore Guyana their own. So at the moment they're controlled by ExxonMobil, but with time, the Venezuelans are going to make their move. So everything West is now on a shaky ground, and it's a full court defense. But I regarded over the long run, this is as effective as King Canute flogging the waves to stem the tide. This is a change that is so broad and so large that it's, I think Western powers can only play for time a little bit, but in the end, I think that the BRICS alternative will prevail.
Very interesting thoughts from both of you. I want to shift to the push for digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. Martin, you highlighted a very interesting story on Kuwait in Armstrong Economics. I'm going to read a quote here. Kuwait has forced over 1 million citizens to hand over their biometric data in one of the most extreme pushes for digital ID. Could you break that story down for us? What's going on in Kuwait? Do you think this sort of approach is coming to Western nations? And then I'd like to get both of your thoughts on where things are headed for the push for digital ID and CBDCs as well.
Well, for several decades, and I've met with many different governments on both sides of the pond, it seems as though there's a consensus that they generally all believe that they would increase their taxation by 35% if you eliminate physical money. And look, Europe routinely cancels its currency. Canada just canceled its high denomination notes. United States actually used to issue $10,000 notes, $1,000 notes, all 1934. They're still valid, but why is it today with inflation the biggest note's $100? It's because they look at it as you found $100 bill in the parking lot. Where's our 50%? They never look at where that they are the problem. That it's I've warned them that the whole problem we have here is really with debt, that they are routinely we're still borrowing money for no reason, with no intent of anybody paying anything back. As Alex said, the interest expenditures this year in the U.S. will reach $1 trillion. It's going to be more than you are spending on military. You're in a Ponzi scheme, and this thing's going to constantly compound. All right. So historically, I've done a lot of research on this. It's not the empirical level of debt that brings down a country. What it is that as long as there's another guy in line to buy the next tranche, you're okay. When they stop buying, that's when the whole thing comes crashing down. They're selling new debt to pay off the old. And that's when you're looking at, we have pension funds that are clients. It's really quite shocking where, like in Europe, on average, probably 70%, they say, oh, you have to be in government bonds because that's safe and secure, and we have, one of the largest pension funds in North America. They used our research and they have been selling off government debt and buying corporate. And S&P went in and said, oh, you're taking on more risk. They said, no. They said, we're using Armstrong economics. We've looked at it and verified his data. He's right. It's government's at the fault. If General Motors goes bust, they go into bankruptcy. The assets are sold. You still get something back. All right. If a government goes bust, you get nothing back. This is also part of war. Why I think they want war so much. You go into war and you default on the debts because you get to form a new government. France is what, the fifth republic now? Spain has defaulted 7 times. Even U.S. in the Constitution, it said that they would pay the debts of the Continental Congress. All right. You can still buy continental currency on eBay. They never honored it. That was it. People held on to it because they thought they were going to be redeemed. They never were. So I don't know of any country that ever paid off its debt other than Andrew Jackson back in the 1820s one time. And mainly because he hated the central banks because they funded his opposition. And Romania, and that was it, really. Everybody else defaults. You can buy bonds from China, from Russia, from any other, just about every government. They look very nice. We used to frame them up in our hallways, just to remind us what happens to government debt. That's about it. So I don't, I think that you're looking at this whole digital ID. This is they know they're losing power, and they instead of reforming, it's like, well, how can we make sure we get everything? And I've argued with them, look, I don't care how much you get, you'll always spend more. Because that's the socialistic aspect. We have to get rid of that. Vote for me and I'll give you this. I mean, they're just bribing voters. That's it. So it's not vote for me because I'll run it better than he did. You don't hear that. Even in the Democratic convention, you saw they threw out Trump's name 289 times. It was just a hate fest. It's not about economics or we'll do this better than that guy. It's vote for me and I'll give you this. And that's unfortunately what the West is in. All my friends from Eastern Europe, Russia, whatever, even China, they know what communism is. They don't want to go back to that. In the West, they go, oh, doesn't that sound nice? So we're still caught up in this Marxist idea of utopia.
Yeah, absolutely. And no better recent example of this type of thinking than Kamala Harris basically promising everyone and anyone tens of thousands of dollars for what do you want to do? Okay, we'll give you 20,000. You don't have to pay us back. First she said black voters, and then I think there was some polling data that showed, well, Hispanics are now favoring Trump. Oh, okay, fine. Hispanic people, you're also going to get a $20,000 loan. It's like absolutely insane. Alex, your thoughts on where we are right now as we sit here today in terms of central bank digital currencies and digital IDs potentially being rolled out in the West? Is this something that's very far away? Governments are very inefficient. Do they actually have plans for a Fed coin in the US, for example? Or is this more of a concept rather than something that they're going to implement anytime soon?
Well, they do have plans, and they've been talking about these plans already since at least 2019. But it was also clear that we're very far behind the curve in implementing those plans. I think that around that time, and this was in the run-up to the COVID pandemic, Augustin Carstens himself, the chief CEO, president of Bank of International Settlements, had that they hadn't even started anything on designing a CBDC, central bank digital currency. And it was only at that time that they started kind of outsourcing this to some Swiss technology companies and so on. And since then, they got a lot of people involved, like the Accenture, the company that's formerly Accenture, and McKinsey, and all of these really, really smart people. And so it's all looking very serious and very professional, except that about 2 years ago, they launched a pilot program in Nigeria. And so they were going to replace the Naira with e-Naira, okay, the CBDC. And first they ran a referendum to ask people if they wanted a CBDC. And of course, something like 99.5% of people said no. And then the president of the country immediately said, okay, well, we're doing it anyway. And so they forced people onto this. So the referendum was, I think, December 21. They gave people something like 10 days time until 10 January 2022 to convert all of their bank balances to this new electronic currency. Chaos ensued, complete chaos. A lot of people didn't have bank accounts so it was the Biden administration that selected Nigeria for this experiment, because the implementation, there are so many complexities to the implementation that they reckoned they need a major market like a real country, but simple. And in Nigeria, it's simple because all the land deeds, insurances, life insurances, pension, all of that is much less advanced than in the Western world. Anyway, regardless of that, a lot large percentage of people refused, or they dragged their feet, or they didn't do what they were supposed to do. The ones who did, it was very unclear, how all this was going to work. So practically from one day to the next, businesses started failing because they suddenly lost all customers, all volume of trade. And so very quickly, this experiment, you had riots in the streets, large-scale riots, practically everybody up in arms against this. The whole experiment lasted 108 days. And at that point, it failed, and they just went back to the old system and paper currency. Now, this is not because Nigerians didn't know how to do it. The Western institutions like IMF, like Bank of International Settlements, Biden administration, they send their top consultants, they send their top currency, people. They carefully selected the architecture on which this e-Naira money was going to be based. They did a lot of work and a lot of planning, and the whole freaking thing collapsed in 108 days. So we're not talking 1970s, we're talking 2 years ago, right? And not only that, but the political consequences were pretty grave, because first election, the president who forced this down everybody's throats lost the election. And the central bank governor who was in charge of this project ended up in prison, and in prison for real, not in one of those nice resort prisons for politicians, but a real prison. And he stayed there for a long time. I don't know if he's still in prison or not, but I know that he was there for for several months at least. And so, rolling this out, this was supposed to be shown to the world as as a flagship case, something to encourage other nations to follow suit, because it was going to go with it modernized the Nigerian economy, blah 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 blah, and everything is working fine and wonderfully. And exactly the opposite happened. So now, good luck finding the central bank governor and presidents, prime ministers who are going to touch this hot potato on somebody else's behalf, because people generally don't care. This doesn't really solve a whole lot, other than maybe giving the current system another lease of life, because maybe they're going to be able to improve their tax collection by 35%, and maybe they're going to be able to get us onto insect diets and limit our consumption of red meat and limit our purchases of let's say carbon intensive products and so forth, whatever fantasies they have. However, I'll wrap up. What happens if you try to ambush people with some system that's overly restrictive is that people simply opt out. They start to migrate into gray and black markets. And gray and black markets are extremely powerful things in an economy, because there's no government red tape. It's an absolute magnet for entrepreneurs. It's a magnet for consumers, because you get practically anything you want a lot cheaper. And for entrepreneurs, it's a brilliant way to try to make money. The government collects no taxes on transactions on the black market. So it's an extremely risky thing for them to force this on us, because, maybe they'll improve their tax collection with CBDCs. But if half of your country's GDP migrates to a black market, you haven't done yourself a favor. And if you look at countries like Argentina or Venezuela, you already do have very close to half of the GDP or more already transacted on the black markets. And it's not because the governments are, allowing this to happen. It's because they lost control. They can keep control if, let's say, people who rebel are on the margin. 0.1% of people are. But if you get a large segment of the population that doesn't want to comply with your rules, you're toast. You cannot reverse that loss of control. And so, you have for years and years and years, these countries have to tolerate black markets because there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, that is a very interesting side of the argument that I actually hadn't considered. I want to talk about the EU, the current state of the EU, its future. They seem to be getting more and more authoritarian. They have a whole campaign against misinformation on the internet, threatening X and Elon Musk that they're going to remove his platform if he doesn't pay certain fines. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, obviously, immigration being a massive issue. The list is very long. And Alex, you recently released a newsletter discussing the European Stability Mechanism and why it presents a massive problem to citizens of the EU. I want to discuss that, but I'll turn to Martin first to just discuss how you see the fate of the EU playing out. We've talked about this before on my program, and you said you think the EU as an entity will cease to exist at some point. What does that timeline look like to you? What is Socrates telling you about that development, and how does this all play out?
I would say the timeline is the earliest part is probably 2027. And it's when governments are losing power that they do get more authoritarian. This is why you're seeing all this crazy stuff coming out. And they know they're losing it. Alex was talking about Nigeria. There's also a backdrop to that. The U.S. was behind taking out Nord Stream. And what they did, they told Germany, don't turn on the second one. And I think Putin did say that at BRICS. He says they could just push the button and turn it on at any time. And U.S. taxpayers were going to pay for a pipeline from Nigeria to circumvent Russia. All right. Then you had the Niger coup. Who jumped on the plane to go over there to try and settle that? Victoria Nuland. All right. That's why Nigeria did the experiment, because, okay, you do this and we'll pay for a pipeline. That was the carrot to Nigeria to destroy their own economy, really. But Europe is decentralized governments with a one-size-fits-all policy. That's what brings them down. Like in the United States, you have, take the abortion issue. All right, you have the Bible Belt, it violates their religion. And somebody went there to a rally and Camilla, he objected. He's something about Jesus. I didn't really hear what he actually said about, the thing with abortion. I did hear her reply, "You're at the wrong place. All right, you're at the wrong rally." That is basically saying it's my way or nothing. And this is what governments are doing. Europe is like, this is our policy. It's going to be migrants. We're going to find Hungary if you don't do. I mean, when you get into that, that's what brings them down. A lot of people, particularly in the West, they do not understand the history of Russia so much. But Lenin, he's a Bolshevik, but he was trying to mimic the United States, in that all the states would retain their sovereignty and could secede. All right. Stalin basically said no, and he wanted centralized control. Of course, the rumor was that, Lenin had written a letter, "Don't let him secede me." And Russia, many of them believe that he poisoned Lenin and his wife. And then he usurped all the power. And that's when you get these types of moves from centralized governments, they always fail. Always. You're dividing the country. United States will split up. You can't do this sort of thing. You look at Zelensky. He's deliberately creating civil unrest. tells the Russians in the Donbass, Russian's no longer going to be a valid language. You have to give up your Eastern Orthodox religion. Christmas will now be December 25th. I mean, even the Pope came out against them. I mean, you can't do this. You know, you just cannot change. So a Muslim becomes president of the United States and says everybody now has to be Muslim. I mean, you know, or in France, oh, well, we're going to outlaw French. I think you're going to have a revolution there. You know, or America said we're going to outlaw Spanish. You can't do these sorts of things. So whenever you get into this controlled, centralized government idea, it does not work. And because it doesn't work, they get more authoritarian. So I don't see even NATO surviving much after 2027. The digital currency, the Federal Reserve cannot create a digital currency itself, because under the Constitution, they would need a search warrant to go look at your account. This is why they outsourced it to the private banks. And the banks are doing this. For example, COVID, right? The First Amendment says the government shall not, okay, with free speech. It doesn't say YouTube, Facebook, or anything else. So all the private companies, they could censor you. And that's what has taken place. And even got to the Supreme Court where the Biden administration was saying, look, cancel this guy, that guy, whatever, because they can't do it directly. You know, this is, you know, what I have had, you know, I can't say with who, I've got to protect my sources, but the IMF has already created their digital currency. And they intend with war that would replace the dollar. And then you would get rid of BRICS, because then it's no longer political. We can all come back together. That they will be the savior of the world or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't trust the IMF basically to watch my dog. But these are the dreams that these people have had. I mean, you can look on my site. I have a video clip of the former president of France, Holland, in Parliament with Merkel, saying the whole reason we're doing this EU is that one government will eliminate European war. And it's the same theory that if the UN and IMF and the World Bank are in charge of everything, we'll eliminate war. But they want to create it so they can get to that point. You know? But I don't see this as surviving. It's not doable long term. And it certainly appears as though I would say the breakup at the earliest spot is going to be 2027. I mean, even NATO. I mean, I've dealt with governments for, you know, nearly 50 years. Once you create an agency, that's it. Back in 85, why'd you end up with the hedge fund community? I testified back then. I warned them. I said, you know, if I obey the laws of the SEC, I go to the jail under the CFTC. SEC said no performance. CFTC said any performance as long as it's disclosed. You know, so you domestically you could not have like a hedge fund. Couldn't go to somebody and say, okay, you make the decision. Should be in bonds, real estate. And you had everybody was pigeonholed. You go to a bond guy, that's the best. You go to a gold guy, oh no, this is the best. Stocks, everyone's like a used car salesman. So that became the hedge fund industry, because you forced them offshore because you have two regulatory agencies. And I argued, look, they should be merged. Everybody else has one. And they said, no, we can't do that because we'd have to lay off 50,000 people. All right. NATO. Why do we need NATO? they were there when Khrushchev said, okay, we will bury you. Yes, communism was trying to spread it like an economic religion. Yes, okay, it was valid then. Now, all you have with NATO, oh, Putin's evil. He wants to take Europe. He's been there since 1999. Okay. The Russian people don't want to invade and conquer Europe. I mean, those are the old empire days. But they have to keep beating that war drum. Otherwise, guess what? They don't get money. If they don't get money, they shut down and they lose their job. So they have to constantly, say, oh, Russia's going to do this to us any day now. Otherwise, they lose their job. So it's, you have to be mindful that those with self-interest are always going to promote their self-interest. That was Adam Smith, Invisible Hand. I mean, everybody's going to act in their own self-interest, and collectively we make the economy. So I would say the breakup is 2027 going into 2032. This whole debt-based system is nonsense. I mean, at this rate, the U.S. national debt by the time we get to 27 would probably be closer to 100 trillion. There's no end in sight. You're always going to be spending interest to keep rolling it forward. And then the crash comes when people say, no, I'm not buying.
Well, Alex, talk to us about the European Stability Mechanism, why it presents a massive problem to the citizens of the EU and the European Union in general, and your follow-up thoughts on Martin about the eventual breakup of the EU and NATO.
Well, what can I say about European Stability Mechanism that everybody doesn't already know? Isn't it a household name? So I'm joking, of course. So European Stability Mechanism was kind of passed in 2012 in the EU, in the Eurozone, as if you read the treaty, the ESM treaty, which establishes the European Stability Mechanism, you realize that it's pretty much a permanent bailout fund, which ultimately benefits the banking cartel. And the individual countries, well, Italy still hasn't ratified it, but individual countries that are members of the ESM mechanism were kind of coerced into it, even to the point that let's say that at one point during 2011, a group of Slovakian MPs looked into the treaty, they realized what it was, and they said, no way, no how, this completely negates our country's sovereignty. And then pressure from ECB, from IMF, from elsewhere, the government in Slovakia fell, and then the parliament passed the treaty. Anyhow, so every country that's a member of ESM, which is most of the Eurozone countries, is on the hook for unlimited amounts, which are set at the discretion of the board of directors of the ESM. Initially, they were talking about 500 billion euros, but in some documents, they were talking about 700 billion euros. And in proportion to their GDP, to the size of their economy, every country was on the hook for a part of that money. So the Slovakians underscore that they, what they get into their budget from the EU was 1 billion euros, but they were on the hook for the bailouts under ESM for 13 billion. This is a mechanism where the bondholders, the bankers, the financiers can buy sovereign debt from countries. If the countries are unable to pay that debt, the ESM can buy it off of them. The ESM can help countries with loans by helping them service those debts. And whatever happens, the bankers get off scot-free. They're bailed out. And the funds that are used for these bailouts are taken from the taxpayers. Of course, nobody knows about this because it was the media practically didn't cover it at all. But fast forward 12 years, it's been 12 years since then. Well, almost. And you see that according to Eurostat, very close to half the Europeans, which is we're supposed to be the golden billion, part of the golden billion. We're supposed to be among the most prosperous people in the world. We're supposed to enjoy high standards of living, but close to half of all citizens of Europe have difficulty making ends meet, which means that they're at risk of poverty or are already in poverty with, poverty rates in Europe are above 15%. In some countries, they're considerably higher than that. And so basically, what the CSM mechanism represents is a leech attached to the economy of Europe on a permanent basis, nonstop, draining it off of its life energy. And so it's just one of those bureaucratic concoctions that if you ask people on the street what they think about this, obviously they don't think anything about it because nobody told them anything about it. They were not practically informed even of the existence of this thing, but they see that things are going from bad to worse. European economies are not exactly vibrant. They're not exactly growing. People are not exactly prosperous, but nobody can figure out quite why or how this happens. But it happens almost predictably. And, when was the last time we had any good news in Europe about anything much at all? We can see, Volkswagen is shutting down three of its 10 production facilities in Germany. It's not just the ESM, it's that the whole system institutionalizes corruption. It institutionalizes favoritism of the oligarchy versus the 99%. It institutionalizes class war, and it enshrines it at law. And then to add insult to injury, all the officers and employees of the ESM are, by the terms of the treaty, instructed to work in strict secrecy. So no informing the public what's being done. And they enjoy full legal immunity, both at the EU level and at the level of every national government that's member of this mechanism. So no institution of the EU or any member country can go and request documents, ask for transaction, for trail of transactions. What money was used, how much money was used, who was the beneficiary of all these funds. And whatever these people do, no legal liability whatsoever. So, this is completely contrary to expectations. And not only that, we have one of the 19th century achievements has been that, the people have taken let's say the government budgeting functions, the ability to levy taxes and then use those taxes. They took them from the unaccountable aristocracies and royal bureaucracies to, let's call it, democratic parliaments, so that, at least to an extent, there's some transparency, and to an extent, people have a say in how their tax money is being used. Well, the ESM reverses that. It throws us back into 18th century as far as fiscal policy is concerned.
Very fascinating breakdown, and this has been an incredible conversation. So much insight shared. I think we'll need to do a part 2 at some point. Before I do let you go, Martin, tell us about Armstrong Economics, what it is you do there, Socrates, and how people can get access to information from Socrates as well.
Well, you can just go to our site, armstrongeconomics.com. We don't sell advertising, or we try to keep it as an open forum. We have offices from Beijing down to Dubai, and we're kind of like a mini UN. We've got staff from everywhere, and we have every race, creed, gender. We are basically trying to recover the entire world, and it allows us to really see how capital moves over the years, mainly because everybody, as I said before, acts in their own self-interest. So you have to look at it. Gee, would somebody from Japan invest in Germany? It depends upon the currency. What's the instruments? So that's what we pretty much do, and we try to cover all the political side. We put that into our computer. It's done very well on projecting elections and things of that nature, but not from polls, from economics. I think Nigel Farage came to our 2019 conference in Rome, and he said, of course, he's there. We were the only ones that said he would win. All the newspapers said, oh, we're going to lose, Brexit, but this is, people vote really on their economic side. So it's going to be very interesting. Even the 2016, Hillary had 40 times more money than Trump. All the newspapers said she was going to win. Trump won. Our computer was right. This one's going to be very interesting because I've never seen the computer project somebody that could possibly even get 60%. Only 3 presidents in history ever reached that. There was FDR one time, the first time, then Johnson when Kennedy was assassinated, Nixon when he said he was going to take us out of Vietnam. Usually most of them are like 51, 52, 53%, nothing abnormal, but this time it's showing quite a gap.
So I'm assuming it's predicting Trump is going to win.
Yes. I do a lot of podcasts. I also know some of these neocons. I've had dinner with them over the years, and you do not see a warm light when you look in their eyes. Trust me. I said before, people thought I was crazy, but beginning of the year, I said, look, I think they would probably try to assassinate Trump. I just know what these people do. They took out Kennedy. Nothing's off the table. You can even Google Project Northwoods. Kennedy wanted to shut down the CIA because they had even gone to a proposal to kill Americans and claim that Cuba did it to justify an invasion. That's on Wikipedia now. It's been declassified. Project Northwoods, and that's what I mean. There's nothing that is off the table with these people. Weapons of mass destruction. Johnson even said, for all he knew, the Vietnamese were shooting. We were never attacked. They were shooting whales that night. They've lied about absolutely every war period. So that's pretty much what we try to do. Just call the shots from an unbiased perspective. We're not blocked in China because they know it's a computer that's generating it. You don't have to worry about on page 3, but by the way, overthrow your government. So that's what we try to do. It's been an interesting journey, but we give it a good shot.
Great. Well, I'll put a link below to Armstrong Economics. Alex, tell us about Krainer Analytics. And you also have a fantastic free newsletter, Alex Krainer's Trend Compass, I believe it's called. So if you could tell us about that too, it'd be great.
That's Substack, which is free. But I also publish iSystem Trend Compass, which is not free, which provides daily decision support for about 200 global financial and commodity markets, according to price trends. There's no attempt to predict anything, to analyze the fundamentals. Is simply algorithmic signals produced on the basis of price fluctuations themselves. And we also engineer turnkey portfolio solutions for asset managers. That's basically what I do. People can find out more about that on my website, iSystem Trend Following, and the Alex Krainer's Trend Compass. This is my Substack, and nothing is behind the paywall there. Everything is out free. And then they can also find me on Twitter, on X. My handle is @NakedHedgie.
Great. Well, I'll put links to all of that, as well as Armstrong Economics on X as well. Gentlemen, fantastic conversation, and greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting.